The San Francisco 49ers are standing at one of the most fascinating crossroads in the entire NFL right now. And if you think March Madness is wild, you haven't been paying attention to what's happening inside this organization. Because while the rest of the league is filling out brackets, the 49ers are essentially building their future through a storm of uncertainty, calculated risks, and some very familiar patterns that could define their next era. This is a team that still believes it can compete at a high level, but at the same time, the cracks are starting to show. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the situation surrounding Trent Williams. The fact that the 49ers are willing to let his $10 million bonus lapse, while his cap number balloons toward $47 million, tells you everything you need to know. This is not panic. This is patience mixed with pressure. The front office believes they can still rework the deal before the draft, but the reality is much deeper than that. Williams is 37 years old, still elite when healthy, but undeniably nearing the end. And the 49ers are now forced to walk a tightrope between respecting a franchise cornerstone and preparing for life after him. That tension is bleeding directly into how this team is being projected in mock drafts, and honestly, it's turning into its own version of chaos. Because depending on who you ask, the 49ers could go in completely different directions in the first round. Some believe the priority has to be the defensive line, especially after finishing dead last in sacks in 2025. Others are convinced the offensive line needs immediate reinforcement. And then there's the wildcard scenario, the one that feels the most 49ers of them all, where they pivot entirely and draft a skill player that wasn't even considered a top need. That unpredictability is exactly what makes this team so dangerous, but also so frustrating to analyze. Take the defensive side of the ball, for example. The addition of a pocket-collapsing presence like Michael Williams last year was supposed to stabilize the front. Instead, it highlighted what was missing. The 49ers don't just need strength on the line. They need speed, bend, and a true pass rush specialist who can change games on third down. That's why prospects like Cassius Howell are being discussed as potential first-round fits. He's explosive, flexible, and versatile enough to drop into coverage, which is exactly the type of hybrid defender new defensive coordinator Raheem Morris has historically thrived with. But even that comes with risk, because this team has been here before. They've invested heavily in defensive linemen with upside, only to see inconsistent returns. And when you look back at the 2020 draft, that lesson becomes impossible to ignore. That draft was supposed to sustain a Super Bowl-caliber roster. Instead, it became a case study in how quickly things can unravel. Javon Kinlaw was brought in to replace DeForest Buckner, and while there were flashes, the consistency never came. Injuries derailed his development, and by the time he started to stabilize, it was already too late for the 49ers to justify the investment. That single decision altered the trajectory of the defensive line for years. And yet, the same draft also gave them Brandon Ayuk, who for a time looked like a cornerstone player. He developed into the team's top receiver, earned a major contract, and seemed like a foundational piece for the future. But the NFL doesn't operate on what seems certain. Contract disputes, injuries, and off-field concerns completely flipped that narrative. A torn ACL and MCL didn't just end his season. It effectively erased his future with the team. Now he sits in roster limbo, a reminder of how fragile even the most promising situations can be. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the 49ers' future and want more breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe and stay locked in, because what's coming next could reshape this franchise for years. And that brings us back to the present, where the 49ers are once again trying to balance immediate needs with long-term vision. The offensive tackle discussion is a perfect example. Prospects like Caleb Lamu are gaining traction as potential first-round picks, especially given the uncertainty surrounding Trent Williams. Lamu's pass protection is already at an NFL level, but his run blocking still needs development. And that raises a critical question. Do you spend a premium pick on a player who might not contribute immediately in a system that relies so heavily on dominant run blocking? Because make no mistake, this offense is still built around physicality in the trenches. And while Colton McKivitz has been serviceable is not the standard for a team with championship aspirations. But then, just when you think the 49ers will follow logic, history steps in and complicates everything. Because this is also the same team that has a habit of investing in running backs, sometimes at the most unexpected times. The idea of selecting someone like Jadarian Price in the second round might seem questionable on the surface, especially with more pressing needs elsewhere. But within the context of this system, it starts to make a strange kind of sense. Kyle Shanahan's offense has always been built on versatility and depth at the running back position. Injuries are inevitable, and having multiple backs who can execute the system is not a luxury. It's a necessity. The issue is value. Using a second-round pick on a complementary back, especially without a third-round selection, could limit the team's ability to address more critical weaknesses. And that's where this draft becomes a puzzle. The 49ers have multiple needs, limited premium picks, and a roster that is both talented and fragile at the same time. By the time you get into the fourth round, the strategy becomes even more unpredictable. This is where the 49ers have historically taken swings, sometimes hitting big, but often landing in development territory. Prospects like L.T. Overton, Jude Bowery, and Chandler Rivers all represent potential, not certainty. And while one of them could emerge as a key contributor, the odds suggest that at least some of these picks will require patience. That patience, however, is something this team may not have much of, because the window, while still open, is not as wide as it once was. Veteran contracts are stacking up, key players are aging, and the margin for error is shrinking with every season. Even the discussion around prospects like Peter Woods highlights the dilemma. He's strong, technically intriguing, but limited in explosiveness and versatility. Drafting a player like that requires confidence in your coaching staff's ability to develop him. And while the upside is there, the floor is uncertain. For a team in win-now mode, that's a dangerous gamble. This is the reality of where the 49ers stand. They are not rebuilding. They are not fully stable either. They are navigating that narrow space in between, where every decision carries amplified consequences. And as the draft approaches, one thing becomes clear. There is no single move that fixes everything. No perfect prospect. No guaranteed outcome. Only choices. Choices that will determine whether this team can extend its competitive window or watch it slowly close. So as the noise around mock drafts continues to grow louder, remember this. The real madness isn't in the predictions. It's in the stakes. Because for the 49ers, this draft isn't just about adding talent. It's about defining the next chapter of their identity. And if you want to stay ahead of every move, every rumor, and every decision that could shape this franchise, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because when the 49ers make their move, you're going to want to be the first to understand exactly what it means.